We're going to start off down in T-Town, where the prodigal son has returned after his 9 minutes of fame in Tuscaloosa last year before going to the Seahawks. Ryan Grubb is back. He is back with Kalen DeBoer, his BFF, and they are ready to unleash an offense on the SEC in 2025. The floor is yours, my man. You've been waiting for this OC hire for a long time. It seemed kind of like every day passed, it wasn't going to happen, but Ryan Grubb's finally here.
Yeah, third time's a charm, man. I mean, Saban, before he hired your boy Tommy Rees at Notre Dame, he had Ryan Grubb take a little trip to Tuscaloosa and hop in the lab with him and study some offensive tape. And depends on which rumor you believe, but the offer was made apparently to Grubb to be the OC, but at Alabama at that time. And Grubb decided to stay in Washington with DeBoer. Again, there's no hard evidence to see if he ever was actually offered the gig, but most people believe he was. But yeah, he turned Saban down to stay in Washington. And then, of course, DeBoer comes to Bama, brings Grubb with him. Grubb stands up in front of the Red Elephant Club down there in Tuscaloosa and everybody and says, "Hi, I'm Ryan Grubb, your offensive coordinator." And that lasted all of about 10 seconds. And he became the OC for the Seattle Seahawks. And the Seahawks this past year had a decent year in the passing game, but struggled a little bit in the run game, and just didn't work out for Grubb and the Seahawks. And consider me the old meme that sits back and says, "What a shame that it didn't work out," because that opened up the door for old Grubb to team back up with his boy, old KD, Kalen DeBoer in Tuscaloosa, as Ryan Grubb is obviously now named the offensive coordinator at Bama. And look, these two guys, they've been together literally almost their entire coaching careers, dating back to their days at Sioux Falls. They were, together at Fresno, together at Washington, and their offenses have been ridiculous together every single time they've been coaching together in the past. But what I think is the biggest deal of all of this is the coaching continuity in general between keeping Nick Sheridan, offensive coordinator this past year for Alabama, on staff to be the quarterback's coach, which is he was like tight ends, quarterback's coach, stuff like that at Washington with Grubb and DeBoer. So Sheridan took a demotion from offensive coordinator to stay on staff with DeBoer and Grubb to be the quarterback's coach. And Jamarcus Shepard, wide receivers coach at Alabama, is staying on board to be the wide receivers coach. He was rumored to be possibly in for the running for the Washington State job. There were rumors of him being in possible runnings for the Purdue head coaching job. So for him to stay on staff, as good as he is at recruiting and developing wide receivers, having the continuity of that group together like they were in Washington is huge. As most of you, if you've been listening to us, following along with us through this past year, I talked about a lot how this past year, the 2024 Alabama team was not Kalen DeBoer's team. It was a player-led team by the senior captains because of the unique situation of a brand new coaching staff coming in January in the same calendar year to take over for the greatest coach in the history of the game. There was no precedent ever before set like this ever before. In the transfer portal era, where someone could come and take all of your players for a 30-day window, but you couldn't go get anybody else. You weren't allowed to go get transfers during that time. So if DeBoer and his staff comes in and acts like there's a new sheriff in town, this is how we're going to do things here around here now, and starts playing tough guy and trying to police everything in a hard-nosed way, I mean, man, you're going to probably lose a lot of your roster. And they couldn't do that this past year. And I think some people laughed at me and talked about maybe I was making excuses and things during that time. And lo and behold, about every single talking head that you see that does a freaking podcast or does a college football show, that's all everybody's talking about now in this offseason. And so I don't know. Maybe I should pat myself on the back for that. But yeah, those senior captains, your Jalen Milrose, our, Malachi Moores, they're gone. They did a great job while they were at Alabama, but they're now gone. And this is now Kalen DeBoer's team. He now has his staff that he would rather have, that he is more comfortable with, and he can be more of a CEO and allow someone who he trusts with everything, one of his best friends and one of the best offensive coordinators in the game, is now going to be calling plays for Alabama. I just think that is absolutely huge. I think it's going to be huge for the growth of whoever QB1 is going to be between Ty Simpson, Austin Mack, or incoming freshman Keelan Russell. And I think this, and also Ryan Grubb, his background before he became OC, O-line coach. He's a really good offensive line mind. He sees things like our boy Cole Kublik would say. He sees things starting at the line of scrimmage. Alabama the last 2 or 3 years has had problems at the line of scrimmage on the offensive line. That is the biggest difference of Alabama's offense in some of the last few years. So I think this is a big deal. Is this the thing that makes all of a sudden dynasty back on? Alabama's going to win the national championship? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, though, that this is a major step in the right direction for the Kalen DeBoer era.
Yeah, last year obviously was rough for the offense at times. And, you mentioned the player-led stuff with Jalen Milroe. If Grubb stays there last year, and doesn't go to the Seahawks, he's got Milroe as his quarterback. And we don't know if Milroe's any better than he was last year. And so you go 9-3 or 9-4 with that team. Maybe it's a chink in Ryan Grubb's armor, right? And so maybe sitting away for a year. Again, bringing in a quarterback. And, next episode, we're going to talk quarterback battles. And Alabama's will definitely be a hot one because I'm already on record for saying I would start Keelan Russell over those two, but my opinion really doesn't matter. But we're going to talk about those quarterback battles. So he's going to have his pick. Keelan Russell obviously came out. He's super excited. Ryan Grubb's going to be there. Obviously, we've all saw what he did with Michael Penix. And so, you're hoping that he can duplicate that. And everything being said with Russell, coming in as one of the highest, or if not the highest, Alabama rated recruit ever. You got to think he's going to be on that track. But we're not all top 10 picks in the NFL draft, so it remains to be seen. But it should be fun down in Tuscaloosa. Let's head up north to Columbus. The defending national champions, Ohio State. They have been raided. Offensive coordinator, gone. Defensive coordinator, gone. Offensive line coach, gone.
Heavy is the head that wears the crown, brother.
Yep. We know Chip Kelly took that bag from the Las Vegas Raiders and Pete Carroll, over $6 million a year to call plays for the Raiders. I'm not going to turn that down. No way. Defensive coordinator, we all know Jim Knowles. We talked about that last episode. Everybody's talked about that ad nauseum. He went to Penn State, highest paid defensive coordinator. Ohio State's still searching. Justin Fry, offensive line coach. He headed out the door too, and they went to your family's neck of the woods, down in Blacksburg, Virginia, and tried to get Tyler Bowen and succeeded. And so you've got thoughts on that too, right? You got thoughts on Virginia Tech, losing a guy like that and what it means for that program.
Yeah.
And I've got thoughts too, just kind of how I think it just further, is separating the Big Two, the Big Ten and the SEC, from the rest of the conferences, including the ACC and the Big 12.
Yeah, I mean, so Tyler Bowen was not the end-all be-all offensive coordinator for Virginia Tech. I mean, he wasn't, Chip Kelly or something like that. He's not Steve Sarkisian or Lane Kiffin, but he was a solid OC for VT. And Virginia Tech ran the ball well in the 2 years that he was there, especially when Kyron Drones was healthy at quarterback. And Bashil Tootin at the running back position ran for over 1,200 yards. He had really good 2 years running the football overall under OC Tyler Bowen. But again, he's not the end-all be-all. Most Virginia Tech fans are not just devastated that he's gone. But this is just more of a reflection, in my opinion, of where Virginia Tech is as a program right now. For those that don't know, my entire family is from the New River Valley in Virginia, the Radford, Blacksburg, Christiansburg area. I grew up going to Virginia Tech games. I grew up on the Michael Vick era. My dad was Frank Beamer's first ever quarterback, Frank Beamer's first ever coaching job at Radford High School. So a lot of Hokie roots, you could say, for myself. So I follow that program very closely. And growing up, they were a model of consistency, just a really good college football program, winning 10-plus games every year. They're a far cry from that now. And they're just not a serious program right now, in my humble opinion. In this new era of college football, you have to invest a lot of money. You just do. That's where we are, to be able to compete. And when you start, obviously, when you lose games, and then when you have a ton of players that, like this past year, Virginia Tech had a ton of players coming back. And they were picked, a lot of people, they were like the darlings pick for everybody to compete for an ACC championship. And they just kind of fell on their face this past year. And then now they just got raided by the transfer portal. And they've got coordinators now leaving to take what is position-wise is a demotion. But the problem is the rest of the country is viewing it as a promotion. Going from a coordinator calling plays at Virginia Tech to be a position coach, an offensive line coach at Ohio State. That's all you need to know right now as far as where Virginia Tech is as a program, that the rest of the country is viewing this as a promotion. That's a problem. And that to me is a sign of Brent Pry. I mean, great guy. Hokie blood through and through. But you better start winning games, brother. You better start winning games.
Yeah, we're going to talk coaches on the hot seat later in this episode, so stay tuned. And he's going to be on the list for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But on the flip side of this for Ohio State, you're getting a guy he's got NFL roots. He came from the Jacksonville Jaguars before he went to Virginia Tech. He coached at Penn State under James Franklin, O-line, tight ends. He's kind of thought of as a really good, like, run game type coach. So Ohio State lands a big hire here to make him the offensive line coach and run game coordinator. And why I believe that this is a really good hire even more is what Ohio State did right after that, which was they hired Brian Hartline and promoted Brian Hartline to offensive coordinator, who has never been the primary play caller. He's been a wide receivers coach, an elite wide receivers coach, and an elite recruiter. He's definitely paid his dues. It's well-deserved. But having another guy like Tyler Bowen, who has called plays, who is a run game coordinator and offensive line minded, to kind of help Hartline a little bit, I think was a good move by Ryan Day, because also Ryan Day by nature is more of a passing game type play caller himself. So having a guy like that and a voice like that in Tyler Bowen, I do think that helps, and I do think it makes sense. But where I want to go with Brian Hartline here, and I know this is probably going to upset some Ohio State fans, but I'm not saying Brian Hartline's going to be a failure. I'm not saying Brian Hartline's not going to be a good offensive coordinator. He may be an elite offensive coordinator and an elite play caller, just like he was a receivers coach and a recruiter. But we don't know that. You're going from one of the best offensive minds and play callers in the entire sport in Chip Kelly. I mean, the NFL and the Las Vegas Raiders think so much of Chip Kelly that they're paying the man $6 million per year to call plays. You're going from that guy to someone who has never been a primary play caller. And everybody just thinks it's a grand slam home run. Like, maybe it is. We don't know that yet. So I think this is kind of a roll of the dice by Ryan Day. And for those Ohio State fans that says, well, you had to make this move, we were going to lose Hartline. You can't lose Hartline. Guys, Ohio State is Ohio State. Ohio State is not Brian Hartline. Come on. The Buckeyes are a model of consistency, maybe the biggest model of consistency in all of college football. Since I have been alive, the Buckeyes have been just consistently a winner. They may not win national titles every year, but they're a double-digit win right in the thick of the title race every single freaking year, no matter who the coach is. So this is a roll of the dice. Now, I know that having a head coach like Ryan Day, who is a really good play caller, it definitely helps. Because if Hartline is not getting the job done, he obviously can take the reins back and start calling plays. But that's just a way that I look at it. Again, I don't think he's going to fail. We just don't know.
Yeah, I think they tried this a couple years ago with him calling plays, and Ryan Day kind of took back over responsibilities. I think possibly with the national championship monkey off of his back, Ryan Day maybe could be a little more experimental, have a little bit longer of a leash for some of these guys that he hires. But that remains to be seen too, whether, if he's going to change, the way he coaches it all. I think the run game will be solid. As usual, they got James Peoples coming back. They brought in C.J. Donaldson from West Virginia. Yep. So I think the run game will be solid, as they've got weapons on the outside too. They're going to have a quarterback. So how
about that? Hey, a first-time primary play caller with a redshirt freshman quarterback. And I know that the job is not won yet. Like Julian Sayin is not the named QB1 yet. I think we could probably, unless he gets injured or something unforeseen happens, he's going to be QB1.
It's going to be a young quarterback regardless.
Exactly. You're going to have a first-year starter at quarterback with a first-year primary play caller. But again, the weapons that they're going to have, like you just said, my goodness. And we got to mention the defensive coordinator, Bill. They have not made a hire there yet. But if you believe the Auburn beat writers and the folks that cover Auburn and get paid for a living to cover Auburn, out of nowhere yesterday, DJ Durkin, Auburn defensive coordinator, all of a sudden gets a $2.5 million per year new contract, making him the second highest paid coordinator in the sport. And as soon as that happened, I texted my boy Tyler here and said, who came after him? And I started thinking, there's not a lot of DC jobs out there available in college football other than Ohio State. And I'm like, no way Ohio State was coming after DJ Durkin. And DJ Durkin's a solid DC. He is. He's solid, and he's a really good recruiter. But, I don't think that he's kind of looked at as like one of the top 2 or 3.
Is he $2.5 million? Is he worth it?
I don't know. We'll see. Depends on how Auburn does going forward. But all of a sudden, it starts coming out that Ohio State and Ryan Day was making a run for DJ Durkin to come be the defensive coordinator for the Buckeyes. And again, do I know that that's 100% factual? No. But the Auburn beat writers and the folks that cover Auburn for a living, that's what they reported. So I guess I should say sources say that Ryan Day and Ohio State was coming after DJ Durkin. But whether it was Ohio State or whoever, somebody was, because there was no reason for Auburn to just out of nowhere, I'm going to more than double this man's salary to stay and be our defensive coordinator just because we like the guy. You don't do that unless somebody's trying to come get you, and Durkin and his agent now have leverage for Auburn to keep you. So the search still continues for Ryan Day and the Buckeyes for their DC. And in my opinion, that hire, the DC hire, is by far the most important hire for Ohio State. Because what was the biggest difference for Ryan Day's Buckeye teams this last 3 years? The physicality and the elite play of that defense. And who was the DC? The best in the country in Jim Knowles. So they better go get somebody who can play call on that side of the ball if they want to continue to compete at a national championship level.
Well, continuing here on defense, let's head out to Norman, where Brent Venables is getting back to his roots, and he will be calling the defense. Not surprising, really. Brent Venables is.
I love it.
Some would say he's in a make or break year, and
he is.
Who better than to control your destiny than yourself, right? If he's gonna go down, he's gonna go down calling his own defense. And if you think about Brent Venables and his track record, like, he was Jim Knowles before Jim Knowles, right? He was at Clemson. He was the hottest name. That's why he got the Oklahoma job, obviously with the ties there. But he got the Oklahoma head coaching job because of his performance while at Clemson. So give me your thoughts on Brent Venables and the defense there in Oklahoma, how it could improve. Obviously, off a down year, 6-7 season, and then kind of on the Oklahoma offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I think that we could say of probably the last, 15, 20 years, the best defensive coordinators in college football over this time period, you could say would be Kirby Smart, Brent Venables. Kirby Smart when he was at Alabama, Brent Venables when he was at Clemson, and Jim Knowles over the last few years. And so, yeah, to your point, with your job on the line, you coaching for your job this year with a lot of pressure that Brent Venables is probably feeling this year. He swung for the fences and tried to hire Jim Knowles as his DC. It didn't work out. So I don't know why he would go get someone that is not only anywhere near the same level as he is of calling a defense. So he just named himself defensive coordinator. And I remember when Sark left Alabama for the Texas job, he talked about this after the fact, that he got advice from Nick Saban when he left to go be the coach at Texas. And Saban, of course, put in a major word for Sark to be the head coach at Texas. And Saban's advice to him was, this time around, you need to still do what you do best, which is call plays. You need to continue to call plays. And I just don't know why that, like, in college football, when you've got someone that is like an elite play caller on whatever side of the ball it is, that you give that up to someone that's a lesser version of you. And the only reason that you should give up those duties is if you do have someone, again, like a Jim Knowles. So he swung for the fences for Knowles, didn't work out. So Venables is going to call the defense. And honestly, if you're an Oklahoma fan, you should be ecstatic about this because he is one of the best. Now, obviously, they're losing quite a bit on that side of the ball to the NFL, but they're in good hands with Venables calling the defense. And I love the hire at offensive coordinator, though, that Oklahoma did with Ben Arbuckle. I know that was made weeks back, but Oklahoma now has one of the top 10, like, play calling combinations in college football. Roster-wise, yet to be seen.
Well, the big question for Venables is that in a lot of the games last year, his decision-making as far as, like, time management, all this stuff, calling timeouts, just it was called into question a lot. So with him calling defensive plays, how much does that take him away from, kind of like the CEO type role? Let's go forward on 4th and 2 or not. Like, if he's over there talking to the defense, offense has got the ball, it's 4th and 2 at the 50-yard line. You're going to have to basically rely on Arbuckle to make those decisions, right? Or, you're going to have an analytics guy, but he's going to be talking directly to Arbuckle if you're focusing on the defense. That's the problem I see here.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Obviously, when you're calling plays, you're no longer can have as much of a CEO role, but he'll still have it.
Yeah. Speaking of defense, Notre Dame lost defensive coordinator Al Golden to the Cincinnati Bengals. He couldn't turn down that NFL money, the NFL DC position. So they were looking around. They were rooming for Jim Knowles as well, but they went and found Chris Ash from the Ashes, you could say. Nobody really heard of him. He had just been kind of hanging out since, he was defensive coordinator in 2020 for Texas, safeties coach for the Jags in 21, worked for the Raiders as the DB coach for a couple of years, then back as like a scout last year for the Jags and Doug Peterson. And he kind of came out of nowhere. Like, this name kind of came out of nowhere. But Marcus Freeman has kind of earned a lot of respect in people's minds on kind of like, you're not going to question a lot of his hires anymore.
Again, man, I really like this hire. People are going to just look at like, oh, we got this random guy from the NFL that was a failure head coach in college football. Well, wasn't that kind of what the book on Al Golden was when he came to Notre Dame? That the outside world, outside of South Bend, and maybe even some people in South Bend probably weren't just thrilled with the hire. And I remember when Sark came to Bama to be the OC, when he was not doing super well with the Falcons in the NFL. It wasn't looked at very fondly, at the time. And it, of course, ended up being a huge success. Obviously, Al Golden ended up being a huge success at Notre Dame. It's yet to be seen with Ash. But, I mean, Ash was the defensive coordinator at Ohio State when they won the national championship years back when they beat Oregon for the national championship game back in like the 2014 year. So he was thought of well enough. If you know anything about the Urban Meyer era at Florida and at Ohio State, that dude did not hire idiots on his staff as coaches. He always had an elite staff around him, and he trusted Chris Ash enough to be his defensive coordinator. So he's a national championship winning defensive coordinator in his time. And like Tyler said, Marcus Freeman in his young coaching career has absolutely earned the right for people just to trust him that he's making the correct hires of the staff around him. And all he did was go last year and hire Mike Denbrock away from LSU as OC. And so people just need to trust him that he's making the right hires here like he did with Al Golden, that Chris Ash is going to be a good hire as DC for them.
How about the offensive side of the ball? They lost Dylan McCullough. I think he went to the Raiders as well, right? Pete Carroll's just poaching everybody. And they went and they hired Jawan Sider, who was the running backs coach at Penn State, who just had a lot of success running against Notre Dame in that Orange Bowl with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. And Jawan Sider had a lot of success with Miles Sanders a couple of years back, too.
Yeah, I mean, he was like run game coordinator for Penn State, and he's been a really good recruiter and obviously a great developer of talent with coaching Miles Sanders and, like you said, Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. So, I mean, imagine being a running backs coach and you're like, dang, I'm going to leave Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. Well, if you're going to do that in college football this year, it better be for Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price.
Yeah.
So interesting that he would leave Penn State like that, though, to where he's just going to be a running backs coach. He's not like a run game coordinator or anything, no title like that. Again, it just shows the respect that these guys have for Marcus Freeman.
Yep.
And also a veteran like Mike Denbrock. So that was a really good hire, obviously, again, by Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman there.